When it comes to global box office, China is projected to overtake the United States as the biggest market in the world by 2020. Chinese law, however, only allows 34 Hollywood films to be released on the mainland each year, meaning there's an intense competition to earn one of those coveted slots. And since Chinese censors are notoriously strict, outright banning movies they don't like, Hollywood studios are more than happy to make changes to their films in order to get a piece of the action. Here's a look at some movies Hollywood was forced to change for China's sake. Doctor Strange. Whitewashing is nothing new in Hollywood, but the problem has come to a head in recent years with a bunch of controversial against-race castings. In 2016, Marvel Studios came under fire for Doctor Strange, which cast Tilda Swinton in the role of the Ancient One, who in the comics was a Tibetan mystic. According to the film's co-writer, C. Robert Cargill, that presented Marvel with a major problem because the Chinese government refuses to recognize Tibet as an independent country. He told the Double Toasted podcast, "The Ancient One was a racist stereotype who comes from a region of the world that is in a very weird political place. He originates from Tibet, so if you acknowledge that Tibet is a place and that he's Tibetan, you risk alienating 1 billion people and risk the Chinese government going, hey, you know, one of the biggest film-watching countries in the world? We're not going to show your movie because you decided to get political." Skyfall. 2006's Casino Royale made history as, after 20 previous attempts to get him there had proven unsuccessful, James Bond was finally introduced to China. And the cost was just a few new lines of dialogue from Dame Judi Dench glossing over that whole Cold War thing.
In the old days, if an agent did something that embarrassing, he'd have the good sense to defect. Christ, I miss the Cold War.
However, 2012's Skyfall was subjected to heavy editing at the hands of Chinese censors who removed all references to torture tactics used by the Chinese authorities, as well as cutting a scene in which a Chinese security guard is killed during an assassination. They decided to leave in a scene in which Bond asks a Chinese casino hostess about child prostitution, though the Chinese subtitles deliberately misquote the secret agent, changing his question to one about connections to the mafia as opposed to trafficking.
Tattoo on your wrist is Macau sex trade. You belong to one of the houses. What were you, 12?
Iron Man 3. One of the most shameless attempts at a China cash grab in recent years, Marvel's Iron Man 3 was influenced by Hollywood's newest Eastern audience in more ways than one. The first being the new take on Tony Stark's arch-nemesis. There was clearly no way the racially insensitive Mandarin would ever be allowed to appear on the big screen in China in his original comic book form. So Marvel Studios and Iron Man 3 director Shane Black decided to scrap that version entirely in favor of an all-new, non-Asian fake Mandarin played by Sir Ben Kingsley.
Don't hurt the face, I'm an actor.
You got a minute to live, fill it with words.
Just a role. The Mandarin, see, it's not real.
But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The studio also filmed a number of scenes specifically for the Chinese release, cutting in 4 extra minutes of footage filled with product placement and a new Chinese mentor for Tony Stark, Dr. Wu, who performs surgery on Stark and has a conversation with his computerized assistant Jarvis in Mandarin. The move backfired, however, with Chinese viewers seeing through the product placement and questioning the logic of Dr. Wu's relevance to the story, since, he had none. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Hollywood movies weren't shown in China at all when the original Star Wars trilogy made waves domestically, and as a result, George Lucas' space opera just isn't very well known there. That fact showed plainly in the meager box office takings for The Force Awakens. Episode 7's poor reception was clearly a cause for concern at Disney, who made moves to ensure that 2016's Rogue One, a Star Wars story, didn't suffer the same fate. Chinese stars Zhang Wen and Donnie Yen were hired in genuine supporting roles in an effort to drum up interest in the spin-off, and their inclusion created plenty of hype. Hong Kong-born Yen, China's second biggest action star after Jackie Chan, initially refused the role of Chirrut over fears that his participation was just a marketing ploy. However, director Gareth Edwards managed to convince him otherwise. Yen told the South China Morning Post, When the director approached me, I began by asking, quite frankly, if it's a real character or if he's only casting me based on commercial considerations for the Chinese market. Once he told me what my character was going to be like and some of my lines, including the iconic "May the Force be with you," I recognized the importance of the character. Unfortunately, despite Edward sticking to his word and even allowing Yen to choreograph his own action sequences, Chinese audiences still didn't buy it, and the film bombed there. Jonathan Papish from China Film Insider told The Wrap that the small number of Donnie Yen or Jiang Wen fans who turned out to see their faces were completely confused or bored with the rest of the story. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Disney responded to reports that Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End had suffered quite the cull at the hands of China's censors by admitting that there had been some cuts. But the Mouse House declined to elaborate further. The franchise's previous installment, Dead Man's Chest, didn't get a release at all because of its ghostly elements. So for the series' third movie, Disney was happy to part ways with a number of scenes in order to push it through. Surprisingly though, the scenes Chinese censors asked to be cut all involved Chow Yun-fat, one of the most famous action stars in Chinese cinema. It seems strange that Chinese authorities would insist on scenes featuring one of their homegrown stars being removed from the film, but they were reportedly very unhappy with Yun-fat's character, Cao Feng. The pirate lord of the South China Sea appears in traditional Qing dynasty garb with a shiny bald head and long, dirty fingernails, an image censors in the country found to be an offensive stereotype. Most of the scenes setting up the character were deleted, making his sudden appearance and death very confusing to Chinese audiences. The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. China insists that 14 of the 34 Hollywood films it approves for mainland screening each year must be presented in either 3D or IMAX. Formats that have proven incredibly popular thereafter heavy investment in the technology. Lionsgate used this to their advantage when it came to releasing The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 in China, hoping to improve upon the disappointing returns of the previous installment, Catching Fire. The first part of the franchise finale was converted to 3D, especially for China, and when it easily bested the previous films at the box office, Part 2 was given the same treatment. Converting movies to 3D to make a few extra bucks doesn't always work out, however. The Bourne movies are very well known for employing an excess of shaky cam in their nauseatingly shot action sequences. Yet Universal sought to milk 5th installment Jason Bourne for all it was worth and release a 3D version in China. According to Quartz, the result was a line of people throwing up in the restroom of the cinema, with one film fan begging Hollywood not to do anything that dumb again. Please don't offer 3D just to grab money anymore. Chinese people are not stupid. We can vote with our feet and money. Pixels. When Sony was subject to a cyber attack from what many suspect were hackers acting on behalf of the North Korean government, a number of sensitive emails were dumped onto the internet for all to see. The leak revealed details of how the Adam Sandler comedy Pixels was changed for China. A line of dialogue mentioning a communist conspiracy was given the axe, and a scene in which the country's beloved landmark, the Great Wall, comes under fire by the film's arcade-themed alien invaders was cut from the script before filming began. Li Chao, Sony's chief rep in China, told his stateside executives that even though breaking a hole in the Great Wall may not be a problem as long as it is part of a worldwide phenomenon, it is actually unnecessary because it will not benefit the China release at all. I would then recommend not to do it. Chow's recommendations didn't make a whole lot of difference in the end, as the much maligned sci-fi comedy only pulled in $15 million there anyway. Red Dawn. At one stage, it looked as though the planned remake of 1984 Cold War cult classic Red Dawn was going to be shelved when its original studio, MGM, ran into financial difficulties. Contra Film took the reins and the film finally got the green light for 2012, though even after the production wrapped, the problems were far from over. Chinese news outlets learned that the Soviet army that waged war on small-town America in the original Red Dawn had been replaced by Chinese invaders. The result came in the form of headlines like US reshoots Cold War movie to demonize China. Naturally, the studio execs panicked about the chances in the Asian market. A decision was made to change the invading Chinese army to a North Korean one, with 5 different special effects companies brought in to restore hopes of scoring big in China. They were given the unenviable task of removing all references to a country that was essential to the plot, digitally altering dialogue and replacing every Chinese flag and symbol. Dan Mintz from Chinese-based distributor DMG Entertainment said that if Red Dawn had been released in its original form in China, there would have been a real backlash. It's like being invited to a dinner party and insulting the host all night long. World War Z. Considering that World War Z spent years in development hell, with Paramount completely rewriting and reshooting the last 40 minutes of the film at a cost of $75 million, you wouldn't think that the studio would have time to worry about trivial things like where the offending virus originated. As you probably guessed by now, though, the zombie outbreak that ultimately consumes the world in World War Z was supposed to start in China. Instead, producers changed that to Hollywood's new favorite pariah, North Korea, minimizing the risk of getting on the wrong side of the Chinese censors.
Why'd you sell guns to the North?
Why not?
Are they surviving this?
Indeed they are.
In the end, their reshoots and nitpicking paid off in a big way, as Paramount was able to boast that World War Z ended up becoming Brad Pitt's highest grossing film to date. While it failed to recoup its budget domestically, it earned more than $540 million after worldwide receipts were tallied. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.